Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and following on from where we were talking about last time when we spoke about Chris being true and honest, and the many layers of litigation and confusion that went into such a statement, considering we know that, based on what we're going to talk about today, is that Chris is, quite frankly, anything but true and honest. Now, if it sounds like we have sort of covered this article earlier this year, I think I might have done it before. I honestly have no clue even at this stage. But what I am going to say at this point is that as to whether or not we actually talk about anything specific in terms of what Chris's rationale, what his motives really are for lying, mostly to get what he wants, yes, that's pretty up there. But why does Chris want to play up this pretense as though his actions speak for themselves? Which is the thing I feel like undoes a lot of Chris's arguments for being true and honest, and even for his intentions of lying. Is that no matter what Chris says he does or doesn't do, his actions say tell a different story, and you can't really argue that it doesn't because, well, just look at all the incidents that evolved through Chris by means of his actions. I mean, if we could just take one example, Chris pepper spraying a GameStop employee on Boxing Day of 2014. Chris didn't lie about it. He said he did it, and guess what? The evidence is there to prove it. The rationale for it, well, Chris was being. You could argue Chris was being honest by saying it was because of the outrage that Sega had done in changing Sonic's arms to blue. However, it doesn't rationalize what Chris did is what I'm trying to get at. And how does Chris rationalize lying when he makes such a big deal about being true and honest? Well, let's find out, shall we? Pro tip. This list will likely never be complete, due to just how much Chris lies. However, most of Chris's notable lies are here, and if you spot another one, you may add it to the list. Your letter has been read fully and your thoughts have been inputted and accepted for better improvement. Thank you for your efforts. Yeah, this was a tactic Chris started doing towards the end of the mailbags, is that he just left very short responses to increasingly skeptical questions, and Chris never actually accepted them. It was just a way to get them off his back. Meanwhile, I do not lie all the time. I lie some of the time. Chris lying during the Casey and Liquid call when Chris lies a lot of the time, not sometimes. If anything, Chris lies when it has to convenience him, which, let's be honest, it's quite a lot. Chris, not being one to accept personal responsibility, will frequently lie to save face. This trait was likely inherited from his mother, Bob, whose dishonesty was described by Colesmithy as pathological. In many cases, he will lie in a meager attempt to be clever or outwit the trolls. However, Chris is totally incapable of lying in a way that looks remotely convincing, so his lies have the opposite effect, e.g., going to Redmond. In other cases, he will lie to deny accepting personal responsibility for his actions, e.g., the Rule 34 drawing of Megan Schroeder. The reason why Chris is capable of telling bold-faced lies while still claiming to be true and honest probably derives from failing to understand the concept of a white lie, a lie told out of courtesy to avoid trouble and or offending people. Because telling this kind of lie usually is socially acceptable and won't tarnish one's reputation. Chris, in his usual blindness to social rules, probably learned through his brain that it is okay to lie in order to save face because it is possible to do so while still remaining true and honest. Why would you do that anyway is something that Chris doesn't seem to understand either. Like, it's one thing to tell white lies in order just a very small one in order to try and smooth things over. However, it would have done Chris quite a lot of good if he didn't get himself into trouble every so often, or like every other day, or at least if Chris had thought through his action, because sometimes Chris's actions are done a little bit on a rash impulse. Let's be honest, and when you do things on a rash impulse, they're not always the best decisions. They are decisions you make in the heat of a moment, and ones that 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 the repercussions for doing stuff like that is can be 10 times worse because you need a little bit of time to think about what you're doing. That's another thing Chris doesn't do, by the way, if in case you're wondering. Chris doesn't necessarily think before he acts or speaks. Complicating this further is the fact that Chris does not attempt to support his claims with any shred of evidence, and will contradict his lies with even more lies. The end result is that Chris is more or less a compulsive liar. Yeah, once you start lying, it's almost impossible to stop, even in a back-to-back series of sentences. This list serves to document as many of Chris's blatant falsehoods as possible. While Chris is known to speak half-truths, exaggerate, etc., the fact that he is willing to outright tell blatant lies and untruths with no grounds in reality is disturbing, and this list serves to document the latter. So, Chris's lies, at least the ones we know we can document and talk about. Chris claims in his resume that he was employed at Wendy's from August to October of 2001, but he admitted to Casey's father that he had been fired prior to September 11th. 2. Chris claims in his PS3 contest video that the reason he made his imitation PS3 out of pixel blocks and not wood is because wood is not a hard enough material. The real reason, of course, is that Chris has no woodworking skills whatsoever. 3. Chris claimed that mowing the lawn was a demanding physical chore for him, despite using a riding lawnmower to do it. Though, in Chris's defense, it's entirely possible that mowing a lawn, even with the aid of a riding lawnmower, could have been genuinely physically demanding for him, given what we know about his health and his otherwise unique form of driving prowess, or plowess, if you catch my meaning. 4. In a mumble chat, he lied and said that nude photos of him on the Encyclopedia Dramatica were photoshopped. Despite consenting to the photos, Chris also lied to someone he believed to be Shigeru Miyamoto about the ED images being photoshopped. 5. For 2 days, Chris claimed to have a new sweetheart named Chloe after the Blanca breakup. The first mention was to his fans, of all people. Yet if he were already seeing Chloe, why was he sad about breaking up with Blanca? Chris claimed to have met Chloe IRL at GameStop, where they struck up a conversation. Yet Chris has constantly said he freezes even while practicing talking to women. He even said that they had a date together at Taco Bell and shared his first kiss with her. The most damning evidence is Chris never mentioned Chloe again. Furthermore, as of mailbag number 13, he says that he has no recollection of a Chloe. 6. Chris lied about taking a trip to Redmond because he had no financial support and to get a peaceful weekend getaway from the trolls of the internet. 7. Chris claims he jogs regularly for more than 20 seconds despite providing evidence that he is completely incapable of doing so. 8. Chris claimed that he was kicked out of class because he told his professor that he was autistic, when the real reason was him making a homophobic and racist comment in front of everybody. 9. Chris claimed that Blanca received a medallion and sent it back so Chris could modify it. Yet the medallion with the special marks was destroyed on YouTube. Furthermore, in a private chat with Robert Simmons V, Chris admits that the medallion was procured and have been hastily worked on to a new one to throw the trolls off guard. They didn't believe a single word of this, by the way. Again, we've mentioned that before, but do you think the trolls were buying any of this for a second? No, not really. 10. When a nefarious IRL jerk-off confronted Chris on his attraction sign, Chris quickly hit the sign while the jerk-off left to go get the manager. Then, Chris proceeded to lie and pretend he never bought the sign, resulting in him being banned from the store. 11. Chris claimed that he was banned from the game place forever for going behind the counter. In fact, as revealed by Mims on the PVCC forum, the ban for going behind the counter was temporary, and what got him banned forever was the fact that he got into a shouting match with a child and treated the store's manager rudely. Possibly, Chris was mistaken, as he can be slow in the mind sometimes. However, if that was true, then Chris, they might have come to some sort of understanding, but no, it didn't. Also, apparently Chris's history of the gameplays goes a little further beyond this anyway, so it seems unlikelier still, if that was all there was. 11. In an email, Chris claimed Megan said that she loved him, when in reality she said no such thing. 12. He has made occasional claims that he really doesn't hate homosexuals, despite several instances of him showing otherwise. 13. In an IRC chat with Clyde Cash and Billy Mays, Chris told Clyde people who call others gay, or homos if you will, are themselves in dire question of their own sexual preferences. When Clyde pointed out that Chris had called Clyde a homosexual just minutes earlier in the same chat, Chris lied that he didn't. When Chris was shown the exact words he typed, he said he didn't count it because he was retaliating against Clyde's remark. 14. Impersonated C-Chan Solitude Quick and called Casey, telling her about his sexual fantasies which involve recycling. What is he, like a Captain Planet fan now? 15. Chris's challenges to C-Chan Solitude Quick began with a video in Spanish, stating that if Liquid Chris could not respond in Spanish, that would prove he is the imposter. When that backfired horribly, Chris then issued the SingStar Challenge to determine who is the real Chris. When Chris lost the SingStar Challenge, he declared that the contest meant nothing. Despite the humiliation Chris subjected himself to for coming up with the idea of his own volition. 16. Chris made a fake page, mimicking PlayStation.com, that showed him as the winner of the Parappa the Rapper contest. 17. Trying to sound like a tough guy, Chris claimed in the 15th of October 2009 Captain's Log entry that he did not give a dang about the reappearance of Liquid Chris, which is obviously not true since Solid devoted the entire first half of the Captain's Log to discrediting Liquid. Solid also stated that it would be the last time he mentioned Liquid, so of course he mentioned him again in a videos just 6 days later. In the same video, in that video I should say, Solid even used one of Liquid's SingStar Challenge songs to mock the trolls. The song's original purpose is to mock Solid, proving that Liquid does indeed still agitate him. 18. In Mailbag 14, Chris offered a revisionist account of his ejection from Grace Baptist Church, claiming that he was banned from the congregation because his pastor found images of women in bikinis on my Facebook. He was offended. In fact, as Chris himself revealed in an email to Lord Silly Nipples in 2008, he was kicked out after his pastor discovered his catalogue of Chris's sexuality deviant behaviours on Encyclopedia Dramatica, as well as the deranged YouTube rant from his 25th birthday. 19. In Mailbag 25, Chris revealed that he told his father that he had taken down the videos of the Chandler house off the internet. The videos are still readily available on YouTube. Whoops. 20. Chris began receiving emails in January of 2010 pointing out to him that his drawings of the Raichu from which Roschu spawned in Solitude Issue 0 had a pointed tail instead of a blunted one, meaning the Raichu was male. What makes this incident unique is that Chris could have easily resolved this entire conflict. Since Chris is a long-time fan of the series, he could have easily thought, wait a sec, when did male and female Pokemon start using different sprites again? Done a few quick searches online, and found that all Raichu were drawn with pointed tails prior to 2006. Chris could have easily have summarized this with a footnote or a disclaimer in a future issue of the comics. That's what anyone else probably would have done as well. Eventually, after Chris uploaded an edited page and claimed that the tail had been blunt all along, he had this realization after someone else showed him Bulbapedia. Now, in case you don't know what Bulbapedia is, it's basically just so like a wiki for like Pokemon entries and stuff like that. That's pretty much all it is. And the reason why it's called Bulbapedia is because technically Bulbasaur is ranked as like the very first Pokemon listed in the Pokédex, so makes about as much sense as anything else. 21. In earlier February 2010, Chris added a note to the Wikipedia page for Simona Rosechew, which claimed that she is a completely original character, and not a sloppy knockoff of Evan Christopher George's Seamanchew. This was, of course, an obvious lie, contradicted by Chris's own emails and other statements about Simona's creation. Later, in a phone conversation with Alec Benson Leary, Chris acted surprised that anyone would be unwilling to accept his retraction of the truth, suggesting that he doesn't even comprehend why people might not believe his lies. 22. On Chris's fifth call with Alec, Chris very quickly found his own logic being used against him. To extricate himself from having to admit he was wrong, Chris instead set the phone down and very unconvincingly pretended to be his own mother, carrying on a small conversation, with Chris asking him to clean up some cat shit. Chris then came back to the phone to tell Alec his mom needed him to take care of the cat and that he hung straight up. 23. During the eighth and final phone conversation with Alec, Chris claims Nintendo sent him a letter saying Chris had free reign to use Pikachu in his comic. But when Alec asked Chris to upload the letter, Chris said he misplaced it. Also, during the call, Chris confidently stated that he regularly plays every single one of the games that he owns, this being a valid reason he could not sell them for money. Chris owns roughly 600 video games, so unless Chris had figured out a way to stop time, it would be impossible for him to play all of those games regularly. 24. Chris went to great lengths to tell the fans that he would never show gore and violence in his comics. However, he breaks this statement by killing Evan in a very gory fashion in Sonichu issue 10. He later insists in his first chat with Jackie that it was justified because Alec gored it up first. In episode 17, which was written long before Aspachew even began, ended with Rosechew stripping naked, clawing a man's head open, electrocuting him, and leaving him in a puddle of his own blood. 25. When the trolls started to demand more comics, Chris stated that he was never sure whether he wanted to make money with Sonichu. If that were true, he would never have tried to make a video game about Sonichu, nor try to sell it to business people. 26. Chris has repeatedly referred to the Wallflower as his girlfriend, despite making a video pleading for her to be with him, and in fact complaining about her essentially putting him in the friend zone. 26. Chris promised to remove himself from the internet, only to return to it less than 48 hours later to rant about the Cleveland show. 27. When trying to get himself back into the game place, Chris told Michael Snyder that he's become a better person. This is after all the things he's done since April of 2008. He ends this meeting by calling Michael Snyder a Jew, and despite stating he had nothing against the Jews not 5 minutes earlier. This is especially poignant because the reason why Chris shouted it is because he intended it for it to be an insult. Yeah, also, you might want to note this down, guys, because this is also one of those things you don't really do on an impulse, is that when you give an oath, or when you like shout or swear as it may be, the reason why it's more often than not considered an insult to do such a thing, it's because it's meant to be, it's the way it's interpreted. Like, Chris shouted Jew to Michael Snyder because Chris intended it for it to be an insult. And that's but where Chris goes wrong with this is the fact that you don't necessarily give offense. It's, again, as I said before, it's through it's how it's interpreted. If Michael Snyder wanted to, if thought this was considered an insult, I probably would have suspected Michael Snyder would have made a very strongly worded phone call to the police saying that he was the victim of an anti-Semitic remark. Now, this could have been regardless whether Michael Snyder was Jewish or not. Now, we know Michael Snyder is not Jewish. However, if somebody did that to me, I probably would have, gone to the police and said that I'm not Jewish, but he thought I was, and he thought that he was going to be clever about it and try and do something that he felt was intentionally going to hurt me, just because he couldn't get his own way. Now because of what's happened, and well, yeah, and because of what happened after this, I would suggest that, well, yeah, I'm. How did Chris? Like, I'm sure Chris must have received some backlash from doing that, but surprisingly, I can't think of anybody saying, "Chris, why would you do that? That's a terrible thing to do." Surely there must be other game and hobby places around the state of Virginia. 28. Chris's Wikipedia article about the wallflower contains some of the biggest flights of fancy, blatant lies, exaggerations, half truths, and flat out delusions seen yet from Chris outside of the father call. Specifically, he claimed that he and the wallflower had shared a kiss. Since this would have been Chris's real first kiss outside of the Chloe lie, it was considered important by obsessive quickie editors to see if he remembers it later. The Wallflower Wikipedia page article has written on the 19th of April, naturally leaked emails from Jackie showing that by the 10th of April, 9 days before making this highly suspicious claim, Chris had either A. momentarily forgotten he had been kissed, a monumental occasion in his life, B. lied on his Wikipedia about being kissed, or C. lied to Jackie about being kissed. In the end, a lie is still a lie. That's a nice Dark Souls 2 reference right there. Although it's possible he's basing his story on a gross exaggeration of the truth, the two sharing a drinking straw in the current troll favoured for this. Young Sonichu, knowing this, do you still desire peace? Oh dear. 29. In Mailbag 49, when asked about his opinion on a possible repeal of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy that would allow open homosexuals to serve in the US military, Chris said, now bear with me on this one, guys, because this next part is just dreadful. Chris said that he thought the policy should only be replaced so that the homos can go die in explosions. When called out on this in several later mailbags, Chris forgoes apology to either deny the claim ever took place or claim that he retracted it. Where? Where did Chris retract it? He later would alter an email in mailbag 51, which contained the quoted remark to make it appear as though Chris was being pro-gay in the original email, up until the death of the Wikipedia in May of 2010. The original homophobic reply in mailbag 49 remained unchanged and unretracted. 30. In the emails reply cache and Surfshark Tito about Chris's PS3, Chris swore that he would not reveal the name of this new girlfriend. He broke this promise in a video not 2 weeks later. 31. Also in the Clyde and Tito PS3 emails, Chris said he would not buy another PS3. Not only did he do that and begin earning trophies about 2 weeks later, but he also bought a PS3 Move controller seen in this particular video. 32. In an email exchange with Jackie, he claims his penis is bigger than previously photographed and is no longer bent. 33. Chris told Vivian G that he read the book A Girl Who Brought Down the World, when in reality he gave it to his pastoral counselor, Rocky Shoemaker, and never touched it beyond this. 34. In the Miyamoto emails, Chris claims he never sexually harassed Megan Schroeder, despite drawings she came for quick.jpg, and Megan repeatedly having told Chris to stop touching her. 35. On the Tomboys and Tomgirls of Virginia forum, he said that if homosexuals kept it behind closed doors, he wouldn't bother them. Aside from his well-known issues with homosexuals, his comic states that if he had the power, he'd constantly be on the lookout for homosexual activity and punish them to suit. 36. In You're Always Pretty, Chris told his mother he was taking pictures of her when he was really recording a video of her. 37. When Chris informed his mother that he destroyed his PS3, he told her that the machine was already malfunctioning before he smashed it to bits. In reality, the PS3 was still operational when Chris decided to put it out of use. 38. When he held the lemonade stand, He claimed that his father died of cancer, when in fact he died of complications from heart failure. However, this could just be Chris assuming Bob died of cancer because he had it, at least at one point, and not taking time to look into his actual cause of death. What a piece of shit Chris is for doing that. You know, I'm coming up to nearly the 10-year anniversary of when my nan died to cancer. She had breast as well as brain cancer. It's the reason why, among many other things, I have two cancer pins right here. I've actually got one for prostate cancer, specifically for men. But if you can see right here, I have the pink one specifically for breast cancer. I also have a gold one, which I don't know if gold is meant to be representative um of people in their twilight years or who are beyond a certain age, or if it's anything to do with people who've got brain cancer. But that's just how it is. Um, yeah, I lost my nan 10 years ago to cancer, and then I lost my eldest cousin about 4 years after this. She was Me eldest cousin was only 39, and my nan was 85 when they both passed respectively. What I'm trying to get out of this is that because both of them had, breast cancer, I'm just going to say this for the record. Chris, don't start saying things if you don't know if they're true. I think when it comes to stuff like this, you have to absolutely know, because even if you just made a mistake, I still think you should be the one to know, Chris. He was your father, not ours. Anyway, sorry, where were we? 40, I think. There's a lot of these. Chris told Jackie in an email that he has grown tolerant of the Xbox 360 and respects those who own one. But recently in 2013, Chris went back on his word by defacing a display for the Xbox One console at his local Walmart, thus proving that his bizarre hatred for the Xbox is still strong. 41. Despite Chris's obvious morbid obesity, he has always lied about his weight, being evasive and giving numbers that are more consistent with his own delusionary self-image than reality. As early as February of 2010, Chris admitted that he had, at one point, weighed more than 220 pounds. On Facebook, on the 4th of January 2014, he claimed that he only weighed 202 pounds. Despite his obvious sagging triple chin visible in his profile picture, users of the Quickie forums generally speculated that based on the photographic evidence, he was probably underestimating his own weight by at least 60 pounds, or 27 kilograms. 43. When Catherine said no to a relationship with Chris told her that he was entitled to a relationship, and in a later email, presumably after being called on this bullshit, he claimed he had said no such thing. On that note, he also publicly referred to her as his girlfriend for months, despite Katie saying to him point blank that their outings were not dates. 45. Chris stated that he has D-cup breasts. Kiwi Farms uses it determines they are actually A cups, and that Chris is just fat. 46. Chris did a promotion where if someone sent him a PS4 for his birthday, they would get a $500 coupon for his custom-made Sonichu amiibos. Obviously, nobody would send him a PS3, but that didn't stop him from saying someone did. He claims that someone called Cagney Lynn Moore bought him the PS4. But upon a closer examination of his Facebook page shows that the details of the order are linked to Fingerhut, the company he bought the PS4 from. This proves he bought the system himself. And that Cagney Lynn Moore was probably Chris using the name Cagney Lynn Carter, a now deceased ex-porn actress. May she rest. What happened to her was also absolutely abysmal as well. We can't there's no other way of saying it than that. 46. In Quickville shopping is on vacation, Chris lied about his Etsy shop being on vacation when it had already been forcibly closed by Etsy's staff, due to repeated complaints that he was not delivering orders. He also lied about working up to set up a Zazzle shop. He decided to beg for handouts over the next several months instead. 47. Chris lied about seeing a doctor about his self-inflicted taint wound, and later about the photos of it being about an elaborate troll. 47. Chris continually lied about his creative groove being killed because Lulu banned him. In reality, he stopped work on the comic long before that had happened, and he had even solved the publisher problem within a month by sneaking back onto Lulu under an alternative name. 48. Chris repeatedly lied about the reason for selling his father's stamp collection, claiming he needed money for bills, but immediately spending it all on Legos. Well, toys, but tit for tat. 49. Chris claimed in I Am Sick of the Hate, I Could Use a Break that Bob was the one who revealed their address and phone number to the internet, despite it being Chris who had done so, and did it on numerous occasions. Bob didn't have anything to do with this. 50. During the Doopy saga, Chris said to Doopy that he was taking care of his parents, but his dad had already died, and long before speaking to Doopy. 51. Chris claimed you could tell that Solitude was inhabiting his body by his change in mannerisms. However, he is acting exactly the same as before. To be fair, all his shitty recolors act like him anyway. 52. Chris intentionally misled the WCT, Spunky, No, Don Lachaume, and Bella about the identity of his sexual partner in July of 2021, telling his new girlfriend was a woman over the age of 50 when in fact it was his 79-year-old mother. He even responded to the affirmative when asked about the WCT if his girlfriend and his mother had met. They have, yes, and Barbie is fully supportive. Chris would eventually brag about the truth, more or less, to Bella in the infamous incest call. 53. After the incest incident, where Chris was issued an EPO against him, No confronted Chris about a transfer of $750 from Bob's account to his. Chris feigned ignorance of this until No produced a screenshot of the theft. 55. In jail letter number 1, June of 2022, Chris claimed that no sex was had between Barbara and I, directly contradicting his own words during the incest call, and that he had foreknown about the betrayal plans from Bella, No, as well as Sockless long before even June of 2021. He had also tried to claim that Bella had confessed to faking much of what was said in the call, not providing details as to when she confessed to this or the circumstances to which she confessed in. Or for that matter, if Chris is claiming all of this, why is he not speaking to his lawyer about it? In jail letter from the 27th of June 2022, Chris claims that he was not attracted to Bella and that they were just friends. Despite this, he claimed in a chat with the Watchman that he considered her a potential sweetheart. Quite frankly, I think they're made for each other. Screw it. 58. The October 2023 video titled Setting the Record Straight, There Was Never Any Sex Involving Me in 2021, is ironically packed with lies. Chris falsely claims the court found him innocent of his incest charge. The charge had been dismissed following Chris's lawyers filing for an autism-deferred disposition. Chris also claims he did not have sex in 2021, insisting he did not have sex with Bob, contradicting DMs he had sent to Bella, No, and the WCT, as well as admissions to No, Dylan Thomas, and the WCT, immediately following the incest leak that he had sex with his own mother. Chris also spreads unproven rumours about Bella in his anger towards her. Yet he still considers her to be a sweetheart for some reason. Chris. Some may argue that this string of nonsense and constant contradictions. I don't know if that's the sort of thing that Chris's lawyer possibly put into the report about the deferred disposition. Because let's face it, Chris constantly flip-flops on his story. Maybe he doesn't even know what's going on. But mind you, with that being said, they will probably have to put Chris into a home of some sort, because if Chris genuinely was starting to lose the power of rational thought, I think the court would have made this known that, guess what, we can't let Chris out because he's an absolute menace to society. 58. In the interview with Keffels on January 16, 2024, Chris once again lies about the circumstances of his crimes and the arrest, calling Bella a sexually perverted deviant who persistently approached him with the ideas of sexual deviations and claiming awareness of her plans, saying she failed the test. When she took recordings of the assorted conversations she had with Chris and spliced them together to create the incest call, this conflicts with several private messages and admissions he has made to several parties, including Bella herself, and the information presented within the incest call, which shows that Chris initiated conversation on that topic. Furthermore, he appears to double down on his claim that he did not have sex with Bob, now saying that their time together ahead of Chris's arrest involved him talking with her about his family history, revitalizing her brain cells and everything. He also continues to spread more unproven rumors regarding Bella's intentions. Do you really want to go back to prison, Chris? Because I swear to God, yeah, this sounds like he is going straight back if I had to hear any of this. 60. In a tweet from the 22nd of January of 2024, Chris claimed that the older girlfriend he had described to Noah in 2021 was Fiona, at least in wishful thinking at the time. This lie contradicts statements he had made to Noel that his older girlfriend was over 50, which was true of Barbara Chandler, not of the then 19-year-old Fiona. 61. Among various things in Chris's response to BabsCon in March of 2024, notifying him that he's been banned from attending the convention permanently, he claims he had committed no crimes, and attributes his negative reputation to false rumors spread by trolls. It bears repeating that Chris had gotten a third major felony on his record by then. Not to mention, Chris was the one to put out unsavory information about himself in the first place. And finally, in a call with Ween on the 17th of May 2025, Chris lies repeatedly. Chris lies saying he did not go to Finland or the Dallas airport and that it was someone else. Chris then falsely claims he was not using Duolingo and went on to spew a bunch of falsehoods about Flutter throughout the rest of the call. Chris briefly lies about not living in Big Island, but immediately caves and admits to living there. Towards the end of the call, he again lies about his own affair with his own mother, blaming the situation on a role-play session with Bella and claiming the evidence was fabricated. Yeah, if it were up to me, I'd send Chris back to prison, because nothing he is saying is making any sense. And, even if we weren't going to give Chris a sentence, I think further questioning, because I'm pretty sure they can drag Chris back to court if evidence emerges. As they say, anything you do say can and will be used in evidence against you, and stuff like that. Mind you, if we were going to be using that logic, we would have thrown the entire book at Chris, because I feel like we've almost just gone through a book right now. So I'm going to give myself a few moments to catch my breath, and I will leave all of you guys with this. Not everything Chris has lied about has necessarily made his life worse, but Chris could have saved a lot of trouble, and he might have still been very well liked, but Chris probably could have just done the right thing by, guess what, trying to save face and hold on to his reputation of being true and honest, because unfortunately Chris has a very different sort of reputation, and that was nobody else's fault except Chris. I know that and you know that, but Chris literally doesn't. Either Chris doesn't want to know it, or Chris genuinely doesn't believe it. One way or the other. So with all that being said and done, I will see all of you guys again at the next station. So, all aboard!